Hi everyone! Today we're going to talk about another problem-solving strategy where we specifically look to recognize different story types. And just like how the books you read have a beginning, a middle, and an end, or they follow a certain plot order, like your characters are introduced, there's some rising action, you come to a main event or that climax or that turning point, and then there's a resolution. We can think about math word problems as having a similar structure. We have some pieces or some parts, and we're always building up to a whole group. So we can think about word problems as whole type questions. And it's important to know that sometimes we'll know both of the parts of the story and we'll be needing to find the whole amount. Other times, we'll know one of the parts and the whole amount that we started with, and we need to solve for a missing piece. So you could have any combination of these pieces or parts and the whole group. One other thing that's important to note is that when I say whole, I don't necessarily mean a whole number. That whole could be a fractional amount, it could be a decimal, or it could be a whole number amount. It's just representing the group of things that you have. So let's take a look at an example. I have a story problem here that reads, Kelly has 50 magazines to store in boxes. Each box can hold 6 magazines. How many boxes will Kelly need in order to store all of her magazines? So I'm going to look at this word problem and identify the whole structure. A lot of times you're going to start by looking for the whole amount. In other words, do I have an entire group of something that I'm starting with? That very first sentence tells me that Kelly has 50 magazines. So that's the whole. That part in this particular question is already known. We know that it's equal to 50 magazines. So now I need to look for the two parts that build up to those 50 magazines. One of them comes in the second sentence. When it tells me that each box can hold 6 magazines, I know that that piece of information is one of the parts that's going to be important. Finally, the question sentence says, how many boxes will Kelly need in order to store the magazines? That's the last part of the problem. The number of boxes is the missing piece of information. So again, a big idea is that in this story problem, one of the parts is unknown. That's okay. That just means that's what we're solving for. So how can you figure out whether we need to add, subtract, multiply, or divide? Well, we can use that whole structure and ask ourselves a pretty simple question. When we narrow down the operation, we can look at it by thinking, do I know the whole? So just like when we looked at that problem about Kelly, I started by looking for the whole or the amount that we have. If the answer to that question is yes, that means we're going to subtract or divide because chances are we're breaking apart that whole amount into smaller groups. If the answer to that question is no, I will add or multiply. Because if I don't know the whole, but I do know the parts or the pieces, chances are I need to build up to that. Remember, addition and subtraction has groups that are unequal, meaning you could have a group of 3 and a group of 17. Those 3 and 17 values don't have to be the same. But to decide between the operations, you can also think about it that multiplication and division have equal groups. So for example, in the question about Kelly, since I knew that the whole was 50 magazines, that narrowed me down to either subtract or divide. Then I would have to decide, are my groups unequal or equal? Since it told me that each box held 6 magazines, I knew I had equal groups. So that's how I could decide that I would need to divide for that question. Now there's lots of different story problem types. There are joining problems, there are separating problems, there are whole type problems. We can do some comparing questions or multiplying and dividing, but all of these have that part-part-whole structure. So be on the lookout for the parts and the wholes that you see in word problems because that will be really helpful. And remember, think back to that, do I know the whole? If your answer is yes, subtract or divide. If the answer is no, chances are you will add or multiply. Thanks for watching and good luck with those story problems.